LeBron James partied even harder than Jay-Z at Diddy's parties. I'm about to make a documentary about him. He once said no party compares to Diddy's. Diddy's parties aren't made for regular people. No phones, no cameras, just NDAs and a room full of bodies. If you've ever been to that house on Star Island in Miami, you'd understand. Now picture LeBron walking in over 6'8", the brightest presence in the room. Before midnight, LeBron had already taken off his shirt and was pouring tequila into people's mouths on the dance floor. And I'm not talking about Savannah. He was surrounded by models from Paris, dancers from Atlanta, and one R&B singer I can't name because she's married now. By 1 a.m., LeBron was standing on the table and the whole crowd was going wild with him. Every woman at that party had their eyes on LeBron. He wasn't relying on money, it was all about presence. When it comes to letting loose, LeBron makes Jay look like a church volunteer. I will send every single one of these parasites to prison and clean the circle up a bit.
For years, whispers followed Diddy's inner circle, but nobody dared connect the dots. Now 50 Cent is back. And this time, he's not trolling. He's documenting. In his explosive new project, Fifth pulls the curtain back on stories the industry quietly buried, hinting at power plays, backroom alliances, and uncomfortable connections that were never meant to see daylight. What really stayed hidden during Diddy's rise? And why does LeBron James' name keep popping up in conversations fans were never supposed to hear? The documentary doesn't make wild accusations, but it asks the questions everyone else was too scared to ask. Through archived footage, insider accounts, and years of ignored rumors, 50 Cent paints a picture of an era where influence meant silence and loyalty was currency. As the internet erupts and old clips resurface, one thing becomes clear: this isn't just about music or basketball, it's about power, protection, and what happens when the truth can't stay buried anymore. For years, Curtis 50 Cent Jackson has played the role of hip-hop's loudest instigator, trolling rivals, mocking industry figures, and refusing to play nice with anyone who crosses his path. But with his latest documentary project, the tone shifts. This time, 50 Cent isn't just cracking jokes or firing off Instagram captions. He's positioning himself as a narrator of history, revisiting moments the culture brushed past, ignored, or intentionally forgot. And at the center of it all is Sean Diddy, comes along with powerful names. His proximity to him has suddenly become a topic of intense online debate. The documentary doesn't open with shocking accusations or dramatic reenactments. Instead, it eases viewers in with something far more unsettling: silence. Long stretches of archival footage, red carpets, award shows, charity events, and interviews where questions were never asked. Moments that once felt normal now feel heavy in hindsight. According to the framing of the project, what mattered most wasn't what people said, it was what they avoided saying. 50 Cent makes it clear early on that this isn't a hit piece. He repeatedly emphasizes that the documentary is about patterns, power, and the way celebrity ecosystems protect themselves. People think secrets are hidden in dark rooms, he says in a voiceover. Most of the time, they're hiding in plain sight. That line sets the tone for what follows. Diddy's rise is presented not just as a success story, but as a masterclass in influence. From Bad Boy Records to fashion, liquor brands, media ventures, and politics-adjacent philanthropy, Diddy didn't just build a career, he built a network. The documentary carefully maps how that network expanded over decades, touching music, sports, entertainment, and corporate America. Every chapter of success came with more access, more alliances, and more people invested in keeping the image intact. What's striking is how the film revisits moments fans once celebrated: lavish parties, star-studded events, viral clips of celebrities praising Diddy as a visionary and cultural leader. At the time, these moments felt aspirational. Now, placed back tape, they raise uncomfortable questions about how proximity to power can blur lines and discourage scrutiny. 50 Cent doesn't narrate these sections alone. The documentary features former industry insiders, journalists, and cultural commentators who explain how certain figures become untouchable. One former publicist describes an unspoken rule: You don't ask certain questions if you want your calls returned. Another insider recalls how stories would die before they ever reached print, not because they were false, but because nobody wanted to be the one to challenge a titan. This is where the conversation broadens beyond Diddy himself. The documentary begins exploring how different worlds, music, sports, business often overlap behind the scenes. High-profile collaborations, brand partnerships, and mutual appearances aren't always accidental. They're strategic. They create a web of shared interests, where criticism of one figure can feel like a threat to many. LeBron James' name enters the narrative cautiously. The film is careful not to accuse or imply wrongdoing. Instead, it focuses on perception and proximity. Clips show LeBron attending events, offering public praise, and aligning with influential figures as part of his broader business and cultural strategy. The documentary poses a simple but loaded question. When powerful people move in the same circles, where does accountability begin and end? One commentator explains it this way: in elite spaces, silence is often mistaken for neutrality, but silence can also be protection. The film doesn't suggest LeBron or any athlete was aware of hidden controversies. Rather, it highlights how fame and brand building can unintentionally place individuals inside systems where uncomfortable truths are smoothed over for the sake of unity and image. 50. Sen's perspective here is especially pointed. As someone who's been both embraced and iced out by the industry, he speaks candidly about how quickly support disappears when you refuse to play along. He recalls moments early in his career when questioning powerful executives came with consequences: missed opportunities, strained relationships, sudden radio silence. They don't cancel you loudly, he says. They just stop calling. The documentary also revisits old interviews where Diddy addressed criticism with charm and deflection. Watching these clips now, viewers are encouraged to notice how often conversations were redirected toward success, legacy, and philanthropy. Those elements weren't fake, but the film argues they were also effective shields. When someone becomes a symbol of progress and wealth, challenging them can feel like attacking the dream itself. Social media's role is another major focus in Part 1. The documentary contrasts the pre-Instagram era when narratives were tightly controlled with today's environment, where old clips resurface overnight and public opinion shifts fast. 50 Cent acknowledges his own role in that shift. His trolling, he suggests, was never just about jokes. It was about refusing to let stories fade quietly. Once the internet starts asking questions, he says, you can't just rewrite the past. Still, the documentary avoids offering neat conclusions. Instead, it leaves viewers sitting with discomfort. Were warning signs ignored? Were rumors dismissed because they threatened too many interests? And how many people benefited from not knowing or pretending not to know? By the end of Part 1, it's clear that this project isn't about delivering a verdict. It's about reopening conversations that were closed too quickly. The final moments linger on a montage of familiar faces smiling for cameras, shaking hands, celebrating success. Over it, 50 Cent's voice returns. History isn't just what happened. It's what we chose not to look at. And with that, the documentary sets the stage for deeper dives ahead into specific moments, resurface stories, and the growing tension between celebrity culture and accountability. Part 1 doesn't accuse. It doesn't convict. But it does something arguably more dangerous to powerful systems. It reminds people to ask why certain stories stayed hidden for so long. Part 2 dives deeper into the intersections of fame, influence, and the decisions that often remain unseen by the public eye. If Part 1 set the stage, showing how silence and proximity shape perception, Part 2 takes viewers into the specifics of moments, the choices, and the subtle moves that kept certain truths hidden for decades. 50 Cent shifts focus to the business and social ecosystem surrounding Diddy, emphasizing how relationships in entertainment are rarely casual. Every handshake, every collaboration, every red carpet appearance carries layers of strategy. Insiders speak about the unspoken rules. Loyalty is currency. And deviation from the expected narrative can result in swift consequences. One former manager recalls, "In that world, if you step out of line or ask the wrong question, your career can quietly stall." It's not dramatic, it's effective. LeBron James' appearances in this section are handled with nuance. The documentary doesn't frame him as a target. Instead, it illustrates how elite figures navigate shared spaces with overlapping networks of influence. Footage of LeBron attending events alongside Diddy and other high-profile personalities is presented not as evidence of complicity, but as part of the broader tapestry of alliances in high-stakes industries. Observers in the film explain that while these interactions are often seen as benign networking, they can also unintentionally shield powerful figures from scrutiny. Throughout Part 2, 50 Cent emphasizes patterns over personal attacks. He revisits moments in which Diddy was criticized publicly, yet remained untouchable in industry circles. Clips from press conferences, award shows, and interviews are intercut with commentary, highlighting how effective management of image and relationships allowed certain actions or omissions to remain invisible to outsiders. For example, a brief segment explores how media outlets historically avoided covering particular stories involving influential figures, often under the guise of insufficient evidence, when in reality, access and fear were key factors. The documentary also explores the intersection of celebrity culture and public perception. 50 Cent points out that fans often interpret visibility as transparency when a star appears philanthropic or outspoken on social issues. The assumption is that their entire character aligns with those public moments. But Part 2 challenges that assumption. Through interviews with cultural commentators, the documentary explores how public personas can be strategically curated, leaving critical gaps in what the audience actually knows. Another focal point is the influence of social media on accountability. Early in Diddy's career, narratives were tightly controlled through traditional media channels. Today, old footage, leaked documents, and viral posts can resurface instantly, forcing a reevaluation of history. 50 Cent acknowledges his own role in this digital shift. His social media presence, often confrontational and unfiltered, has pushed the public to question long-standing assumptions about who is truly untouchable. "I learned early," he says in a voiceover, "that silence can be louder than any statement, and the internet never forgets." The documentary also highlights Diddy's network building in the sports and business sectors. While previous documentaries or media coverage might have focused solely on music and entertainment, this film illustrates how relationships with athletes, corporate executives, and media personalities created layers of influence that extended far beyond the industry. These connections aren't inherently nefarious, the film insists, but they make accountability complex. One expert explains, "When multiple spheres overlap, music, sports, business, it becomes almost impossible to untangle personal responsibility from strategic alliance." As Part 2 progresses, the narrative becomes increasingly analytical. 50 Cent examines specific incidents, not to incriminate, but to show how visibility, alliances, and selective exposure shaped public perception, from celebrity endorsements to philanthropic projects. Each segment is framed as an illustration of how influence can insulate individuals and protect certain narratives from challenge. The documentary also examines the consequences for those who fail to conform to this ecosystem. Former artists, producers, and insiders recount moments when questioning or resisting the status quo led to missed opportunities, professional exclusion, or reputational damage. These stories provide a counterbalance to the glamorous images of wealth, awards, and success, demonstrating that fame often carries hidden costs for those who aren't part of the protective inner circle. Towards the end of Part 2, the focus shifts back to Diddy and LeBron, but with a sharper lens on structural influence rather than personal blame. The film argues that proximity to power can obscure responsibility, not necessarily because individuals are complicit, but because systems are designed to favor discretion over exposure. Through careful editing and commentary, viewers are prompted to consider how much of history is shaped by what was left unsaid, and how much by what was deliberately staged for public consumption. The final scenes of Part 2 juxtapose past and present. Archival footage of Diddy in the 1990s and early 2000s is intercut with contemporary clips of LeBron and other figures navigating the same social circuits. The contrast emphasizes continuity, the same dynamics that protected certain figures years ago still influence decisions and reputations today. 50 Cent's narration ties it all together. It's not about blame, it's about understanding the rules of the game and realizing how easily the game can hide what everyone should have seen. By the conclusion of Part 2, viewers are left with a nuanced understanding of power in celebrity culture. It's not a story of villains and victims, but of systems and patterns where influence, alliances, and silence intersect to shape perception, sometimes for decades. This deeper context prepares the audience for Part 3, where the documentary promises to examine more personal accounts, resurfaced footage, and the reactions that emerged once long-hidden details finally reached public consciousness. Part 3 of 50 Cent's documentary shifts from patterns and systems to the human element, the reactions, revelations, and consequences that surface once hidden stories finally enter the public eye. After carefully unpacking Diddy's influence, the overlapping networks of power, and the subtle dynamics shaping public perception, this section examines what happens when silence can no longer be maintained. The film opens with clips of social media uproar. Fans, commentators, and cultural observers react to resurfaced footage, old interviews, and previously ignored reports. 50 Cent interjects with commentary that's equal parts reflection and provocation. When the walls come down, everyone starts asking the questions they were afraid to ask before. The tone captures the immediacy of modern scrutiny, emphasizing how platforms like Twitter and Instagram can amplify scrutiny in ways traditional media never. Could interviews with former insiders provide a human dimension to the structural analysis presented in Parts 1 and 2? One former assistant recalls the tension of working in Diddy's orbit. You were part of the family when things were good, but the rules were clear: don't step out of line, don't ask the wrong questions, and never break the unspoken trust. These anecdotes humanize the stakes, showing that behind the glitz and fame were real people navigating pressure, fear, and loyalty. LeBron James' involvement is revisited carefully. Rather than sensationalizing, the documentary frames him as an example of how proximity to power intersects with public expectation. Clips of LeBron attending events, meeting with influential figures, and engaging in collaborative projects highlight the duality of fame, the opportunities it creates, and the scrutiny it invites. Experts in the film explained that his careful navigation of these spaces illustrates a broader lesson about accountability in elite networks. Influence always comes with visibility, whether welcome or not. Part 3 also examines the cultural consequences of exposing hidden truths. 50 Cent reflects on the industry's tendency to protect image over transparency. He contrasts early moments of media caution with today's relentless digital environment, where clips can go viral years after the fact and once forgotten stories can spark global conversations overnight. History doesn't wait for permission, 50 says, and neither does the truth. Personal testimonies provide the emotional backbone of this section. Former collaborators, journalists, and insiders recount how their own experiences shaped their understanding of power dynamics in entertainment. Some express regret for not speaking up sooner. Others reveal how they consciously avoided confrontation to preserve careers. These reflections reinforce the documentary's central thesis. Fame and influence create ecosystems where silence is often mistaken for complicity. The final sequences are cinematic in scope. Archival footage of Diddy's early career studio sessions, public appearances, and red carpet moments is interwoven with contemporary clips showing the ripple effects of the stories unearthed. 50 Cent's narration underscores that the goal of the documentary is not judgment, but illumination. We're not here to vilify, he states. We're here to understand how much of what we saw was crafted, curated, or quietly hidden and why that matters. Part 3 closes on a contemplative note, leaving viewers with questions rather than answers. What responsibility do those in positions of power bear for the systems they inhabit? How much of history is shaped by visibility and how much by omission? As the credits roll, the audience is reminded that the story doesn't end with a documentary. Social media chatter, cultural discourse, and continued investigation ensured that the conversation is ongoing. Ultimately, 50 Cent's project achieves its stated purpose. It forces the audience to reconsider assumptions, question previously accepted narratives, and recognize the complex interplay of power, influence, and silence. Diddy's legacy, LeBron's strategic navigation of elite networks, and the broader culture that enables both are illuminated in ways that are both revealing and thought-provoking. The documentary isn't just a recounting of events. It's a study of systems, relationships, and the stories we choose to see or ignore. The questions raised in 50 Cent's latest documentary aren't just about Diddy or LeBron James. They're about the systems of influence that shape celebrity, culture, and public perception. For decades, certain stories stayed hidden, carefully curated by networks of power and silence. Now, 50 Cent is pulling back the curtain, showing the patterns, alliances, and choices that defined an era and continue to influence the industry today. This documentary challenges viewers to think critically. It asks us to consider the role of accountability in spaces where fame and influence intersect. It explores the subtle ways narratives are controlled, reputations are protected, and truths are quietly buried until someone decides to shine a light. Whether you're a fan of hip-hop, sports, or cultural analysis, this film provides a unique lens on the unseen forces that shape what we see, hear, and celebrate. It's not about blaming, it's about awareness, reflection, understanding the stakes when power operates behind closed doors. Don't just watch history unfold, engage with it. Experience the stories that were kept from you, analyze the patterns, and join the conversation. Tune in, witness the revelations, and see why this documentary is more than entertainment. It's a cultural wake-up call.